Imagine flying over the Amazon and looking down at freshly cleared land. Where the jungle used to be, you see something that should not be there. A perfect circle, 300 meters across, carved into the earth. Then another, then a square, then an octagon, then dozens more, stretching to the horizon. That is exactly what happened to Alceu Ranzi in 1986. And when scientists finally mapped what he had seen, they counted over 450 of these structures across 13,000 square kilometers. They are older than the Colosseum. They were built by up to 90,000 people. And until the chainsaws arrived, nobody in the modern world even knew they existed. Now here is the problem. The very thing that revealed them is erasing them. And it is happening right now, while we are talking about it. This story has 4 parts. First, how a paleontologist accidentally became an archaeologist. Second, the civilization that modern science said could never have existed in the Amazon rainforest. Third, how greed is destroying their legacy in real time. And fourth, the race to record what remains before it vanishes forever. If we have covered any part of the Amazon on this channel before, whether it was the lost cities found by LiDAR scanning in Ecuador, the 20 urban centers discovered across the southern basin, or the AI scan that revealed thousands of unknown sites across the desert floor, those stories all shared one thread. The Amazon was not empty before Europeans arrived, but the story we are about to tell might be the most urgent proof of that claim, because unlike those other discoveries, this one is being bulldozed while the papers are still being published. Let us begin with part 1. To understand how this discovery unfolded, you need to picture the state of Acre in the late 1970s. It sits in the far western corner of Brazil, pressed against the borders of Peru and Bolivia, covered in some of the dense tropical forest on the planet. In 1977, the Brazilian government launched a project called PRONAPABA to conduct a national archaeological survey across the country. Field teams working in Acre noticed strange geometric shapes in areas where the jungle had been recently cleared for cattle ranching. Circles and squares, cut cleanly into the red-brown earth of the Amazon basin, some of them hundreds of meters across. The surveyors noted them in their reports, and then, as sometimes happens in government filing systems, those reports gathered dust on shelves in federal offices for years. 9 years later, in 1986, the paleontologist Alceu Ranzi from the Federal University of Acre was flying a commercial route to the capital city of Rio Branco. He was looking out the window the way you do on a long flight over the jungle canopy, watching the cleared patches of Amazon forest slide past below. The deforested areas stood out against the green like wounds in the landscape. And in one of those wounds, he saw them. Enormous geometric trenches, perfectly shaped, sitting in the middle of deforested cattle land like blueprints drawn by ancient architects and left on the forest floor. Ranzi was a fossil specialist. He studied bones and teeth and geological strata beneath the soil of the Amazon basin. He had spent years excavating ancient fauna from riverbanks and sediment layers across western Brazil. But what he saw from that airplane window was not geological. Those shapes were deliberate. They were engineered. They were symmetrical in ways that nature does not produce on its own. And they were everywhere. He began reaching out to colleagues at universities across Brazil, describing what he had observed from the air over the deforested landscapes of Acre. For years, the response ranged from polite skepticism to outright dismissal. The scientific consensus at the time held that dense tropical rainforest could not have supported large populations. The soil was too poor for sustained agriculture. The canopy was too thick for organized settlement. The Amazon was supposed to be a pristine wilderness, untouched by human hands, until modern settlers arrived with their cattle and chainsaws in the 20th century. It was not until the late 1990s when commercial satellite imagery became widely available through programs at NASA and the Brazilian space agency INPE, that Ranzi's observations were finally confirmed from orbit. The geometric patterns he had seen from that airplane were not isolated features or tricks of light and shadow. They numbered in the hundreds, and they stretched across a region more than 250 kilometers wide in the western Amazon lowlands. This is when two researchers entered the story and transformed what had been a curious observation into one of the most significant archaeological programs in South American history. Denise Schaan, an archaeologist at the Goeldi Museum in the Brazilian city of Belém, who would later join the Federal University of Pará, was one of the earliest scholars to recognize the magnitude of what Ranzi had found. She dedicated years of her career to excavating and interpreting the earthworks of Acre before her death in 2018 at the age of 56. Her work laid the foundation for everything that followed. The second was Martti Pärssinen from the University of Helsinki in Finland, who brought European research funding and an international publication network to the project. Together with Ranzi, this three-person partnership spent years mapping what the satellite images and aerial surveys revealed across the deforested stretches of southwestern Amazonia. What they found was staggering. Over 450 individual earthwork sites are scattered across the state of Acre alone. As the mapping expanded, researchers eventually cataloged 1,279 separate structures across 27,569 square kilometers of cleared land. The shapes included circles, squares, hexagons, and octagons, along with U-shapes, ellipses, and rectangles. Each one was defined by a continuous ditch roughly 11 meters wide and several feet deep, carved into the laterite soil of the Amazon floodplain. The diameters of individual structures ranged from 100 to 400 meters across. Some of these earthworks could hold a professional football stadium inside their perimeter, with room to spare. One detail, when we first encountered it in the research, stopped us cold. Along a single stretch of Brazilian highway called BR-317 in the state of Acre, the team identified 11 geoglyph sites lined up along the road like exits on an interstate highway in the American Midwest. Researchers started calling it the Geoglyph Highway. Nobody on English-language YouTube has ever discussed this road. 11 ancient monumental earthworks, visible from the pavement, running through cattle country in a region that rarely makes international news. At certain sites, excavations revealed not one enclosure, but 6 superimposed structures layered on top of each other in the same location. 6 phases of construction and reconstruction were rebuilt over centuries by successive generations. These were not one-time ceremonial markings scratched into the dirt for a single event. These were places that mattered deeply to people for generation after generation after generation. Radiocarbon dating pushed the timeline deep into the pre-Columbian past. The earliest confirmed construction dates to approximately 750 BCE, according to a 2020 study by Pärssinen and colleagues published in the journal Antiquity by Cambridge University Press. The main period of activity stretched from about 500 BCE to 1000 CE, with some structures showing continued use into the 13th and 14th centuries. That means the oldest of these earthworks was being dug into the forest floor of the Amazon, while the ancient Greeks were constructing their first stone temples across the Mediterranean Sea. Alceu Ranzi, reflecting on what the mapping had revealed across the deforested landscape of western Brazil, put it plainly. He said it could be something as important as an unknown Roman Empire or a Mesopotamia, but nobody could answer the question that mattered more than all the measurements combined. Why were they built, and who were the people who built them? Part 2 takes us inside the forest itself. For decades, the default comparison for the Acre geoglyphs was the Nazca lines in Peru. Giant shapes in the earth, visible only from above, were thought to be ceremonial, probably religious, probably made by a small group of devoted ritual specialists working in isolation. That was the comfortable explanation. It fit the old model of the Amazon as an empty wilderness populated by scattered tribes of hunter-gatherers. Then, in 2017, a researcher named Jennifer Watling published a study in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences that demolished that assumption entirely. Watling conducted phytolith analysis at two geoglyph sites called Jacó A and Fazenda Colorada, both located in the Acre region of western Brazil. Phytoliths are microscopic silica structures left behind by decaying plant tissue. They are nearly indestructible. They survive in soil for thousands of years, and they act as a botanical fingerprint of exactly what was growing at a specific location in the distant past. What Watling found in the soil samples from those two archaeological sites changed the conversation about the Amazon forever. The geoglyph builders had not cleared the rainforest to construct their massive earthworks. Instead, they had created small, temporary openings in a carefully managed bamboo forest. The surrounding jungle canopy had stayed largely intact during the entire construction period. This was not slash and burn agriculture on a monumental scale. This was something far more sophisticated. Concentrated around those openings, arranged in dense groves near the earthworks like inventory arranged on shelves in a warehouse, were Brazil nut trees, rubber trees, and edible palms. These were not random species. They were the most economically valuable trees in the entire Amazon ecosystem, clustered together in unnaturally high concentrations. Watling called this pattern a prehistoric supermarket. The forest surrounding these ancient sites was not wild and random. It had been deliberately engineered for human productivity over centuries of intentional planting and management. Her conclusion, published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, Volume 114, was devastating to the old narrative. She wrote that despite the huge number and density of geoglyph sites in the state of Acre, the forests in that region were never cleared as extensively or for as long as they have been in recent years. The people who built more than 450 monumental earthworks across an area larger than the state of Connecticut managed to do it without destroying the forest canopy above them. The cattle ranchers and soy farmers who came after them could not say the same. A separate study by Pärssinen M and colleagues, published in Antiquity in 2020, used carbon-13 isotope analysis from soil cores taken at multiple geoglyph sites to push the timeline of human landscape modification in this part of the Amazon back even further than the earthworks themselves. Their results indicated approximately 10,000 years of deliberate human management of the regional environment. That is longer than the entire recorded history of agriculture in the Fertile Crescent of ancient Mesopotamia and the Middle East. Population estimates based on the density and distribution of the earthworks suggest that between 60,000 and 90,000 people lived in the geoglyph region during its peak centuries of activity. They built monumental architecture using nothing but manual labor and stone tools. They managed the forest canopy to produce food and materials on a continental scale. They cultivated specific tree species across enormous stretches of the Amazon lowlands. And they did all of this without the wheel, without metal tools, and without written language, for over 1,000 years. If we have shown anything on this channel across our Amazon exploration series, it is that the old textbook image of the jungle as untouched wilderness was always wrong. We have found lost cities by LiDAR in Ecuador, urban networks in Bolivia, and garden cities mapped across the southern Amazon basin. Every new study confirms the same reality. But the Acre geoglyphs add something the other discoveries did not. They prove that a civilization of nearly 100,000 people operated for over a millennium, and left the forest standing when they were done. That is not just archaeological news. That is an engineering philosophy that modern industrial civilization has completely failed to replicate. Like and subscribe if you want to keep uncovering what the Amazon has been hiding beneath its canopy. Because what comes next in this story is not a celebration. It is a warning. Part 3. The Destruction. Remember the paradox we laid out at the beginning of this journey. The geoglyphs were concealed for centuries under terra firme rainforest in western Brazil. They only came to light following the mass deforestation that hit the Acre region in the 1980s and 1990s. The chainsaws that destroyed the forest canopy exposed the ancient earthworks beneath the trees. Without deforestation, Ranzi would have had nothing to see from that airplane window over Rio Branco. That is the cruel irony at the center of this entire story. Discovery and destruction arrived on the same logging truck. In 2024, that truck ran over one of the most important archaeological sites in the entire network. On a cattle ranch called Fazenda Crixa in the state of Acre, a geoglyph hundreds of square meters in size and thousands of years old was raised to make way for grazing oxen and a corn plantation. This was not some unknown site buried in a forgotten corner of the jungle. Fazenda Crixa sits on the UNESCO indicative list of World Heritage Sites. It had been identified by researchers. It had been cataloged in published academic databases. It had been formally submitted to the international community for protection and recognition. And it was bulldozed anyway by the landowner to plant cattle feed. The property belongs to a man named Alceu Ranzi, who also serves as president of the Acre Federation of Agriculture. When international journalists asked Ranzi about the destruction of the ancient site on his cattle ranch, his response was recorded in multiple press outlets. He said, "Deforestation for us is synonymous with progress." The president of the Agricultural Federation in the very state where these 450 earthworks stand equated the destruction of the Amazon rainforest with progress. And under current Brazilian law, there was almost nothing that could have stopped him from doing exactly what he did. The regional numbers tell a story that matches his attitude completely. In 2024, deforestation across all 9 Amazon nations exceeded 1.7 million hectares of forest loss. That same year, record-breaking fires tore through 2.8 million hectares of primary forest across the Amazon basin, surpassing all previous annual totals ever recorded by satellite monitoring. Brazil's own deforestation rate had actually declined under President Lula's renewed environmental enforcement policies, reaching its lowest point since 2014 at 5,796 square kilometers of annual forest loss. For a brief period, it looked like the curve might be bending. International observers pointed to Brazil as evidence that political will could reverse deforestation trends in the tropics, but that hard-won progress collapsed almost overnight. By May 2025, the deforestation rate had spiked by 92% compared to the same period the previous year. More than half of the newly cleared land was located in areas that had been deliberately set on fire beforehand. The pattern was unmistakable. Burn the forest first, then claim the land was already degraded, then bring in the cattle. And cattle ranching is not the only force eating through these archaeological sites. Illegal gold mining, known in Brazil as garimpo, has expanded by roughly 1,200% since 1985. The total area of active mining operations in the Amazon grew from approximately 218 square kilometers to over 2,627 square kilometers by 2022. An estimated 77% of those active mining sites show explicit indicators of illegal operation. These mining crews use hydraulic equipment and dredging machines that churn through the same ancient soil layers where archaeological evidence lies buried. Bruna Rocha, an archaeologist at the Federal University of Western Para, in the Amazon city of Santarém, has documented the impact of illegal mining on archaeological sites firsthand. She described how miners dig through stratified deposits and occasionally find artifacts, even wooden ones that survive only in rare anaerobic conditions. But without professional documentation or contextual recording, all of that irreplaceable information is lost forever. The objects are destroyed or thrown aside. The soil stratigraphy that gives them scientific meaning is churned into mining tailings. And the destruction is not confined to the state of Acre or even to Brazil. Carla Jaime Betancourt, an archaeologist studying the Llanos de Mojos wetland region across the border in Bolivia, delivered a timeline that should alarm anyone watching this documentary. She said that time is running out because the spread of mechanical agriculture is destroying a pre-Columbian structure every single month in the Llanos de Mojos region alone. Every 30 days, another ancient earthwork or mound complex disappears under a tractor blade or irrigation channel. Eduardo Neves, a professor of archaeology at the University of São Paulo and one of Brazil's most respected voices in Amazonian research, framed the full scale of the catastrophe in terms that are impossible to misunderstand. He said, "We are seeing 12,000 years of landscaping being destroyed by 30 years of deforestation to raise cattle and grow soy." He called urgently for an extra layer of legal protection with the help of archaeology. 12,000 years of human engineering and forest management. Being erased in 30 for hamburgers and animal feed. Part 4. The race. So is anyone doing anything to stop it? The answer is yes, but the window is closing faster than the funding is arriving. In 2023, the National Geographic Society awarded a grant of $1.8 million to a project called Amazônia Revelada, which translates to Amazon Revealed. The project is led by Eduardo Neves at the University of São Paulo and involves roughly 20 team members, including field archaeologists, remote sensing specialists, and members of indigenous communities living across the Brazilian Amazon basin. Neves has been explicit about what this project represents and what it refuses to become. He has said they do not intend to simply take a plane and do remote sensing from above, because that would reproduce colonialist scientific practices. Instead, Amazônia Revelada is built on a model of genuine partnership with the indigenous nations who have lived in and managed these forest landscapes for generations. One of the most striking images to emerge from the early phases of this project comes from the Xingu territory in central Brazil. A man named Kumesi Kwikuro, an indigenous technical geographer from the Kwikuro, personally pilots a LiDAR-equipped drone over ancestral territory. The technology is cutting edge, the kind of equipment that costs tens of thousands of dollars and requires specialized training to operate. But the data collected by those flights does not belong to the University of São Paulo. It does not belong to National Geographic. It belongs to the indigenous communities whose ancestral land it maps. That principle of indigenous data ownership is a first in large-scale Amazonian archaeology, and it sets a precedent that could reshape how science operates across the entire continent. Meanwhile, a parallel effort is underway at a much larger geographic scale. Dr. Chris Fisher, an archaeologist at Colorado State University in the western United States, leads a nonprofit organization called the Earth Archive. Its mission is breathtakingly ambitious. Fisher wants to create a complete three-dimensional LiDAR scan of the entire surface of the Earth before climate change, rising sea levels, deforestation, and urban development erase the archaeological record that still exists beneath forest canopies and vegetation worldwide. If you have watched our videos on the LiDAR discoveries in Ecuador or the urban networks found beneath the Bolivian lowlands, You have already seen what this technology can do at regional scale. Fisher wants to do it globally. For the Amazon basin alone, he estimates the scanning cost at between $12 and $15 million. Fisher has been direct about the urgency driving his work. He has said we are running out of time because we are losing the Amazon, and we are going to lose things that we never even knew were there. That sentence carries a weight that is difficult to overstate. We are not just losing trees and canopy coverage. We are not just losing animal habitat and biodiversity. We are losing the physical record of civilizations that existed for thousands of years beneath the forest canopy. Civilizations whose engineering principles for sustainable land use may hold answers to environmental questions we have not yet thought to ask. Eduardo Neves put the stakes into a single sentence that has stayed with us since the first time we read it. He said, "The forests are our pyramids." Think about what that comparison means. Egypt protects its pyramids at Giza with armed military guards, electronic surveillance systems, international treaties, UNESCO World Heritage designation, and billions of dollars in tourism infrastructure. Nobody would dream of parking a bulldozer next to the Great Pyramid to clear the ground for a cattle feed lot. Yet that is exactly what is happening to the archaeological heritage of the Amazon. The pyramids of this forest, the earthworks and managed groves and engineered landscapes that represent 12,000 years of continuous human ingenuity, are defended by underfunded federal agencies, contested legal frameworks, a handful of overworked archaeologists, and the hope that a few research teams can scan them with LiDAR drones before the bulldozers and the mining dredges arrive. Alceu Ranzi looked out an airplane window over the state of Acre in 1986 and saw shapes in the cleared earth that nobody believed were real. 40 years later, we have confirmed over 450 monumental sites across western Brazil, mapped more than 1,279 individual structures across an area half the size of Belgium, and established that a population of up to 90,000 people managed the Amazon forest for over 1,000 years without flattening a single hectare of canopy to do it. They built what one researcher called a prehistoric supermarket across the jungle floor. They layered 6 generations of ceremonial architecture on top of each other at individual sites along a highway that did not exist yet. They engineered a landscape so sophisticated that modern soil science is still decoding its methods. And now, in the year 2025, a cattle rancher who serves as president of the local agricultural federation bulldozes a site sitting on the UNESCO watch list and calls it progress. The rate of Amazon deforestation is spiking again after a brief reprieve under environmental enforcement. Illegal gold miners churn through ancient archaeological layers with hydraulic equipment and face no consequences. And every single month, somewhere in the lowlands of South America, another Pre-Columbian structure disappears. There is a team in Sao Paulo with a $1.8 million grant and an indigenous geographer flying a LiDAR drone over ancestral territory. There is a professor in Colorado trying to raise $15 million to scan the entire Amazon from the air before it is too late. They are both running against a clock that does not pause for grant applications or peer review cycles. We started this documentary with a man on a plane looking down at the cleared earth of the Amazon. Now all of us are looking down at the same landscape from satellite imagery and news reports. The question is not whether these sites are important. That was settled decades ago. The question is whether we are watching a rescue mission or a funeral. If this story reminded you of anything we've covered before on this channel, there is a reason. The Amazon keeps revealing civilizations that the old textbooks said could never have existed. Our next video will dig into the scientific war that made those textbooks wrong in the first place. One archaeologist insisted the Amazon was a paradise that could sustain millions. Another said that claim was a fraud. The fight between Betty Meggers and Anna Roosevelt shaped everything the world thinks it knows about the largest forest on Earth. And the echoes of that battle are still shaping policy decisions today. That video is coming soon.